Welcome to another episode of the Mideast News Hour. This week, senior Biden administration official Barbara Liff is coming to Israel and the Palestinian Authority to restart talk or whatever about Israel and the Palestinians. And there are very significant implications both to the timing and of this visit and for Israel itself, for its national security. What we're seeing now is a reinstatement of American pressure on Israel, if it ever relented, to make concessions to the PLO, to the Palestinian Authority in Judea and Samaria, and arguably as well to the Hamas terrorist authority in Gaza. And I could think of nobody better this week to talk about the situation on the ground in Judea and Samaria and the implications of the Biden administration's policy, as well as of the Israeli caretaker government's positions on Judea and Samaria, than with my old friend and colleague, Major General Gershon Hacohen. Gershon Hacohen served in a number of different command positions in the IDF during his long and storied career. He was mainly a commander in the tanks corps in the Army, completing his command posts as the commander of Division 36, which is responsible for northern Israel, the Golan Heights. But Gershon, more than anything else, is an intellectual. He is a philosopher, really, of all things, and one of the most important military strategists that Israel has seen in decades. So without further ado, first of all, thank you so much, Gershon, for joining me on the Mideast News Hour this week. It's a pleasure to finally have you on the show.
Okay, thank you very much. And then just try to describe what's really going in the field in north of Samaria, mainly in Jenin city. And actually,
before you do that, before you give an overall description, which is what I wanted to ask you to do, but can you speak for a second, if you can, to how you view the timing of Liff's arrival in Israel?
I think that after my description,
you want to start with the overall, and then
it will be the outcome. Because what I'm really challenging is the main premises. Upon them was established Oslo agreement, and all of them are just collapsing one after the other. And if the Americans are still coming to make a kind of resurrection for this stupid process that already everyone, without ignoring it, must admit that it is not at all fitting to what's going on. So what on earth they are coming to do? This is the main question. So we are coming to describe what's going on. Actually, the Palestinian Authority forces, those who have been trained and equipped by the Americans, General Dayton, are not at all succeeding to control the main cities, of course, not the refugee camps near Nablus, near Jenin, like refugee camp Balata, etc. In the field, we are facing an organization of equipped groups that working together without differences between orientation. It means that we can find cooperation between Al-Aqsa battalions belonging to Fatah under the direct command of Abu Mazen, because Abu Mazen is still the high commander of Fatah, and Jihad Palestini, Jihad Islamic.
The Palestinian Jihad.
Yes, and other groups like Tanzim, Hamas, all of them are equipped, all of them are working together, not only in order to manage and to create, to lead terrorist operations against Israeli cities, but also to organize a kind of manifestation of power in the way they are acting in the streets, in the fields. Actually, they are creating a zone, a different zone, an autonomous zone beyond the authority of Abu Mazen. If Israeli forces would not really came to act every night against them, we could find a kind of organization, military organization, exactly similar to what's going on in Gaza Strip. Actually, the Israeli forces acting there are not acting in order just to control the area. They are doing that according to very specific and definite information, intelligence information about terrorist activities that could act against Israeli citizens in Tel Aviv, Bnei Brak, as it happened half year ago. And in the last half year, we are really facing a movement of operations with elite forces every night in these territories, and they are all dedicated to save Israeli civilians' life, not in order to make an occupation or something like that. They are coming, it is a strike, arresting those who are preparing terrorist activities and going back. And according to all that, we must bring to focus several basic premises that have been the basic premises for Oslo agreement, and all of them are challenged by the way in which the emerging reality just creating new strategic trend. The first premise is that separation is good for the Israeli security. As everyone in the left wing in Israel speaking like Ehud Barak, that always repeated the slogans, they are here and we are there, or exactly the opposite, they are there and we are here with a border.
You're saying separation between Israel and Judea and Samaria.
And a lot of others like Gadi Eisenkot, Benny Gantz, Yair Golan, just emphasizing again and again, repeating this stupid idea that separation will be the solution. Why it is an unconnected idea? Because already the separation has been made by Yitzhak Rabin that really led the separation in Gaza. In May 1994, all troops, Israeli troops, left the civilian centers in Gaza in May, June 1994. They have been removed to be controlled under the Palestinian Authority after something else happened, Hamas. But in Judea and Samaria, all cities in Zone A and all villages in Zone B have been removed to Palestinian Authority in January 1996. It means that
let me just interrupt you for 1 second, Gershon, to just people who aren't aware. So the Oslo process, the Oslo peace process that began on September 13th, 1993, called for the gradual withdrawal of Israeli forces from population centers in Judea and Samaria and the Gaza Strip. And the first step towards that was the creation of a Palestinian authority, an autonomous Palestinian authority, a Palestinian governing authority, first in the Gaza Strip and the city of Jericho in Judea in 1994 in May and June. And then after Israel and the Palestinians signed a second agreement, the interim agreement, otherwise known as Oslo B, in September of 1995, at the end of 1995, the beginning of 1996, Israel redeployed IDF forces out of all the Palestinian cities and major villages in what are called Area A, the cities and villages Area B of Judea and Samaria, so that the Palestinians have been operating autonomously, governing themselves autonomously since 1996 in both the Gaza Strip and in Judea and Samaria. So that's a separation of governing authority between the Palestinians and Israel. Israel has not governed the Palestinians in any meaningful way since 1996.
Definitely clear and accurate. It means that actually what it is called the occupation was coming to end in January 1996. Since that time, more than 90% of Palestinians are not anymore governed by Israeli government. They are under direct control of Palestinian Authority And after 2007, in Gaza, they are under Hamas, de facto a state, and in Judea and Samaria, under direct governance of Palestinian Authority.
And what you're saying, wait, and just to interrupt you one more time, and what you've been saying since the beginning of your remarks is that essentially in Samaria, particularly, but not only, the Palestinian Authority has not been exercising effective governing authority from a security perspective or otherwise.
This is the following step to describe. Actually, in 2005, another step was acted. You participated with me in that occasion, that the Israeli authorities uprooted 4 Israeli settlements surrounding Jenin. And it means that an absolute separation had been achieved in Jenin arena. So if separation is good for security, we must find in Jenin a kind of a new start of paradise, because separation must bring peace. As Martin Inning was always repeating, good fences making good neighbors. It is true regarding John and Smith in Texas going to the same church at Sunday, that good fences making between them good neighborhood. Not here. What happened in Gaza is the fact that they transformed themselves to be a strategic threat to Israel due to the separation and due to the high fences. Exactly the opposite. It means that the first premise is absolutely wrong. It collapsed according to what's going on in reality. What's going on just last night, we observed in TV how groups, equipped groups, making ammunition, live ammunition exercises in the field of Jenin. They are making by that observable manifestation of their authority, their presence, their existence. It means they are there as creating a new zone beyond the Palestinian Authority. And if Israeli forces would not act there every night, we can find a new Gaza Strip in several kilometers from Jenin, Haifa, from Afula, Haifa, Tel Aviv. It means that the first premise is wrong. The second premise was that, and Yitzhak Rabin emphasized that again and again, that due to the fact that we are making a kind of experimentation, strategic experimentation, it is absolutely in the Israeli borders between the Jordan and the sea, so we can control it, and basically he conceived it as not irreversible, but reversible. It means that if something will go wrong, we can change it because it is under our Israeli control.
You're talking about Rabin's vision, what Rabin intended.
Yes, and actually it is really confirmed to be wrong, because everyone learning what happened in Gaza, it is irreversible. At the moment, the Israeli troops crossing the border, it is casus belli, it is a war with missiles and rockets to Tel Aviv. So they have a leverage to a kind of mutual deterrence between Israeli forces and Hamas and Jihad in Gaza. The same happened here in Jenin and Nablus, because actually what we are finding in the modus operandi of IDF is not that we are coming back to occupy and clean the all cells of terror. We are coming for a night as a strike, killing someone, taking someone, and going out. It means that the basic control of the terrorist groups is still present there. What else we must emphasize? Due to that troubles, that part of them are the direct outcome of lack of Jewish settlements, because why there is a difference between the circumstances in Hebron, Bethlehem, and the circumstances in Nablus and Jenin, because in Hebron there is Jewish presence inside the city, and there are a lot of Jewish settlements there that creating different situation regarding the security situation. The fact that we uprooted the settlements from Jenin territory, every entrance of IDF forces to Jenin city is a march of trucks and APCs. They have time to prepare themselves. In Hebron, you can just jump from the Jewish house to the other house. So they have not time to prepare. Here they are well protected due to the fact that there are no Jewish presence and Israeli civilians present in this territory. Therefore, they are more protected as the terrorists. So what is really required? This is a situation in which it is really necessary to rebuild Homesh, for example. And who are against that? The Israeli
Homesh is one of the, Homesh is one of the,
due to American pressure. And
right,
why
but just to back up for 1 second, Homesh is one of the 4 Jewish communities that was uprooted in northern Samaria around Jenin, surrounding.
It is located in a very high position. High position in the way to Jenin. Very, very strategic position. And why the Americans and the Israeli security leaders, due to the American pressure against rebuilding that settlement, because it is an exemplification of irreversibility. If already the Israelis withdraw from that position, no way to come back. It means that this is disconfirmation to the basic premise of Rabin that the whole process is reversible. They are trying, the Palestinians, together with European and American, making pressure against Israeli government not to let the Israelis to transform the bad circumstances back to what was the situation before the withdrawal. So this is a second premise that coming to be wrong, the reversibility. It is irreversible. The third is that after Israeli withdrawal, after accomplishing main parts of Oslo agreements, we are getting international legitimation for our security necessities. Then every night that we are acting in Jenin, it is due to requirements to protect Israeli civilians. If we are criticized by doing that repeated actions again and again in the depths of Palestinian cities, it means that actually it is a dream to think that all that withdrawals are delivering Israel international legitimation. Not at all. They are asking what on earth you are finding in these repeated actions inside the cities. Don't do that, because they are trying to explain that these actions in themselves are what escalating the situation. Exactly the opposite. Without these operations that are absolutely for defense purposes, we would suffer terrorist attacks in Tel Aviv, Netanya, and all Israeli cities. So the third premise also collapsed. We are not really getting international support. Just for example, what happened after the killing situation of Al Jazeera journalist. A lot of journalists are killed in battlefields. Even you could be killed in your time you've participated in the American operation in Iraq. But what's the difference? That they are asking what on earth you are doing there. I mean, the very fact that we are coming to act in that arena, it is the Israeli fault. It means not at all is international legitimation. The fourth premise is that the Palestinian entity, doesn't matter whether it will be a state or as Yitzhak Rabin defines that as an entity less than a state, must be and would be forever demilitarized. What we are facing in Gaza, what we are facing in Jenin, that they are absolutely equipped. The vision of demilitarization is empty. And from where they are getting all these new weapons for Jenin, they are smuggled from Jordan, part of them by Iranian forces through Jordan. We are knowing what we are succeeding to stop, not all the other smugglers that succeeding to bring the weapons. So the very demand of the Israelis that Palestinian authority, Palestinian state or entity will be demilitarized is absolutely empty concept. Today, no zone in the world could be really demilitarized. The five premise is that economical prosperity will prepare new conditions that prevent the motivation for terror. Actually, Jenin is a prosperous city. All Israeli Arabs from the Galil every weekend coming to Jenin to buy there, everything. Even I was offered by friends, Jews or other, to send my car to replace my engine there. But it is really interesting to emphasize, if we are speaking about apartheid, in the entrance to Jenin it is written, the entrance is prohibited for Israelis, but actually the interpretation is it is prohibited to Jewish Israelis, not to Arab Israelis. Therefore, Jenin became a very prosperous city, including the HEM, American University with medical studies. And Israeli Arabs are studying there. So it is one of the richest cities in the whole Middle East. So they are so rich. What about the promise that if they will celebrate prosperity, they will just forget about terror motivation? Not at all, exactly the opposite. The sixth one is, the sixth premise is about the partnership with the Palestinian Authority, whether it is Arafat or the follower Abu Mazen. Actually, Abu Mazen supporting the terrorists. He's paying for them families. He's not at all speaking against all these new organizations, even though he lost control upon them. So who is really the partner? The idea that we must find Abu Mazen as a hope for new situation, new hope for two-state solution is absolutely not at all beginning to be true according to his behavior. So all these six premises are collapsing. And if we are just now getting a visit of new American person trying to convince us that there is a hope in all this stupid idea of two states between the Jordan and the sea, they are just against the Israeli existence. They can never really convince us that they are really, as they are declaring again and again, committed to the security of Israel. Building and establishing a state, Palestinian state, in that arena between the Jordan and what was called the Green Border is a severe danger to Israel, much more severe than the nuclear threat from Iran.
Okay, so you gave all of the premises that have just fallen apart that the Oslo process was based upon. People, if they want to see a summation of it, can also look in my book, The Israeli Solution, a One-State Plan for Peace in the Middle East from 2014. But so first of all, you raised something here that I just want to spend a little bit of time, if you can explain. You said that Israel's military leadership, whether it's Defense Minister Gantz or former Chief of Staff Eisenkot, who's now joined him in his political party, and so many others of your former colleagues in the general staff, that they're influenced by the Pentagon in their refusal to walk away from all of the failed premises of the Oslo process and their continued insistence on separation as a concept that has any rationality at all for Israel on a national or military level. Can you explain a little bit about the relationship that you've witnessed between Israel's military leadership and the Pentagon, just to explain it a little bit better?
First of all, the Israeli it is not only IDF, it is all security forces are too much influenced by Americans' influence, by American cultural inspiration, and by too close personal connections to Americans. They are not really independent Jews working for the benefit and future of the Jewish people. Secondly, speaking from a professional point of view, I think that we must explain that phenomena. It is a real riddle how so many military experts are not seeing the whole picture, like they are just touching every tree in the forest and yet not conceiving the whole forest. And they are coming to that because they are suffering from too much excellency in micro-tactical operations, exactly like a brain surgery, microchirurg, that forgot everything about ordinary medicine. It is the last one that I will take for a delegation to the jungle or something like that, because I need someone in direct connection to daily ordinary health problems and not just specific excellent operations. And they are there. They are suffering from excellency. And beyond that, what they are not understanding, the whole macro situations, the global arena is absolutely different from those days of Oslo. In that time that Yitzhak Rabin decided to open the window for the ideas of Oslo, the whole global atmosphere was with the speaking of Fukuyama, we are facing the end of history, a global peace. Today, exactly the opposite. Wars everywhere, including the war in Ukraine. And part of what's going on in Jenin is inspiration from what's going on in Ukraine. If the Ukrainians can face the Russians, why not they can face and engage with IDF forces successfully? Therefore, we are in a different global reality. And they are not at all aware about the whole implications of this new global reality. War is really coming back to everywhere, even to Western Europe.
So they didn't understand, they don't understand either the geopolitical situation where, in 1993, the United States had just won the Cold War. It was the unipower, it was the only one around.
Exactly.
And today it's in competition now, not only with a rising China and with a resurgent Russia, but from all quarters, and it's
Even
losing.
just,
It's in Afghanistan, it's losing in Iran.
What if, for example, the Iranian Navy are daring to engage and to challenge the American Navy in the Arab Sea?
Right, these are things that we've never seen, and also attack U.S. forces in Syria fairly regularly. But so the United States is a much weaker position. There are global powers that are much stronger than anybody imagined they would ever become. in 1993 and so on and so forth. But this really brings us back to the Biden administration and a weakened America, apparently not aware of its weakness, but still completely intent on pushing this two-state solution, and that so clearly, fundamentally, and resoundingly failed in every direction for the past 30 years. And how do you, or do you have an explanation for this obsession? You think that it's just animus towards Israel that's it's at the root of this?
I don't think it is just against Israel. It is a kind of mental obstacle to understand the definite change in the phenomena of warfare. Even the fact that the Russians are not succeeding, it's not only so simple to say that they are just nothing. They are failing due to the fact that with new weapons, units that are unprepared, equipped with the appropriate weapon, could really be effective in the new battlefield. It is due to the RPV everywhere, due to a lot of capabilities, including making a connection between very, very simple devices like rachfanim, how to call them?
Like gliders.
That you can buy them everywhere in eBay, and to connect them to simple artillery. It is a definite change in the warfare. So it means that if in the first Gulf War, in 1991, the American superiority was absolutely clear. Today, they lost their superiority, and they are aware about that because they lost the technological superiority. Because today, everyone can be equipped with new technological devices. They are just on the shelves everywhere, very cheap.
But you know, Israel's claim to fame, and you hear it very clearly from the mouths of the same generals that are insisting that separation is a doable concept with the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria. All they keep talking about is Israel's technological prowess, Israel's technological advantage.
This is
so how do you explain that?
This is an idea belonging.
But on the other hand, the proliferation of these technologies is
fantastic.
So deep.
This idea belonged to the last century. We are in the 21st century. Everyone equipped with the best computer, with the best cellular phone, even if he's analphabetic.
Even if he's illiterate.
Yes, and just we can find the Houthi in Yemen, what they are doing with launching excellent new weapons like rockets, etc. Precise ammunition, they can do that. In the same way that I can build IKEA furniture, I'm getting instructions and building it.
So the technology you think is actually far less important than, or being able to develop cutting edge technology is actually not the strategic advantage that Israel's military.
And it is also part of premises that drove Yitzhak Rabin to take this risk. In his decision-making risk management, he took that basic premise as for granted, that we will keep this technological superiority.
So the other question then arising from, I mean, you gave sort of the background overview of the situation and why it is so volatile in Samaria today. I would argue that it's also volatile in Judea and Samaria. We just had outside of Hebron on Friday, an
Yes.
attempted or an actual attack.
But it was with a
that was
knife.
carried out. What?
Pay attention, it was an attack against a soldier with a knife, not with a
And it
rifle.
was carried out by a member of the Palestinian security forces. So it isn't just that it was carried out against a soldier with a knife. It was carried out by his ostensible colleague, the Palestinian security forces that are supposed to be
Right.
operating
It means that
in cooperation with the IDF.
it means that the whole idea of Titan force that will be loyal to the new story of a two-state solution is really an idea that couldn't be how to say, an everlasting promise. Nothing is everlasting. Every day a new day, new motivation.
So Gershon, let's just go for a second from the wider, sort of meta understanding of why things are so bad in Judea and Samaria to actually the situation on the ground throughout, because what we've seen over the past year and a half with Benny Gantz, the defense minister, having total control over the areas and Israeli policy in the areas, is that he's transferred an enormous amount of control over areas in Area C. Area A, we said, was the Palestinian urban centers, their cities. Area B being their large villages, and Area C, which was under complete Israeli civil and security control, are where all of the Israeli communities are, is where all of the Israeli military bases are,
all the main positions.
All of the roads, all of the border areas, all of the passages to Israel's major urban centers, everything that has any military or national value, for that matter, for Israel, is in Area C. And what we've seen over the past year or so is that Benny Gantz has done something that's been unprecedented. The scope of his permission that he's been giving to the Palestinians to expand massively their hold on lands in Area C has been really remarkable. We see where I live in Efrat and in the whole Gush Etzion area.
Because they are ignoring, of course.
So all of the areas that are surrounding all of our communities that make it this blossoming block of communities in Judea are being taken over by Palestinian agriculture, Palestinian illegal mines and quarries. So can you speak a little bit to what the concept guiding Gantz is, how the Americans are involved in it, and what the implications are for what's been happening under his rule, essentially, his uncontested control of the area as defense minister, what the implications are for Israeli security?
Actually, Benny Gantz, together with the Americans, are working subversively against the public opinion of the Jews in Israel. Actually, they realized that time is not prepared for a new ceremony in the White House, declaration of new peace. So what exactly they are doing on earth, instead of what happened in White Plantation, a huge debate about transforming 10% from being Israeli territory to Palestinian territory.
This was the White Plantation negotiations that were carried out in 1998.
So what they are doing now, they are making a de facto transformation and not the jure. It means the zone is still zone C, but de facto it is transformed to be, in all considerations, zone B, because Palestinians are coming to live there and no Israeli controls there anymore from that moment. And why they are doing that? Basically, Benny Gantz ignoring the necessity of settlements in the cooperation between the civilian life and the IDF effort in the arena. Why the Americans lost in Afghanistan? Because the soldiers themselves are the weakest point in the whole equation. Those who are living in the territory, by exemplifying that they are here in order to stay, it means settlers are part of bringing the equilibrium of stability, because why the terrorist activity is going to act? Because he has hope. And what is the hope? That we are not behaving in a way that we are making manifestations that we are here in order to stay. The army is never in order to stay. The army is a weak point in the whole equation. Therefore, they are not really letting building of giving the whole permission to build. We must build every new village or every new house in the Jewish settlement is a kind of statement that they are not really keeping a hope for bringing effectiveness for their terrorist activity, because we are here in order to stay. It means that Benny Gantz is against his fathers from Mapai party of Ben Gurion that always insisted to keep the connection between settlers and military activity.
So, okay, but I think you're right. I mean, I know you're right, but just to give it a little bit more detail, I mean, right now, first of all, the first question that arises is this reversible? I mean, everywhere we look in Efrat, the entrances the entrances to our town are being turned into gauntlets through illegal Palestinian buildings. The access roads that are going to block our access road from expanding to enable our city to grow, and all of the agricultural areas around our town are being cultivated now by the Palestinians through the largesse of the defense minister, and this is going on throughout Judea and Samaria. There was just a recent report that came out with the Ad Khan organization that they have some, I don't remember if it's hundreds of illegal quarries that they've built throughout Judea and Samaria that are decimating the environment. And all of this, the Israeli government and Gantz are turning a blind eye and enabling.
I understand. Actually, what was built is irreversible. In August 2001, 1 month before 9/11, I participated in the Pentagon in a conference about revolution in military affairs. And everyone spoke there about special forces, leadership, special forces, expeditionary forces to the space, etc. And I told them that building a house is a new strategic weapon. And I described them how Arafat encouraging the Palestinians to bypass Jerusalem, to build from Bethlehem, Za'atra, Azariah, and to close Jerusalem to develop to the east side. And this is a strategic threat. And an American four-star general Air Force was sitting there and said, what's the problem? You have F-16, F-15, you can bomb them. Then I told them how. Of course not. We cannot bomb them. They are civilians factors of strategical warfare. And actually, at the moment they are there, it is irreversible. But yet, it is not absolutely late. We can lead an Israeli effort to build and to capture those necessary hills, necessary roads, and to build actively. It means that in the situation right now, the Palestinians are absolutely active and the Israelis are passive. And they are passive according to the instructions of the Americans, and Benny Gantz is working with them together, understanding eye by eye what they are expecting him to do. So a revolution in the Israeli policy must take place.
Well, that of course is subject to elections, because under the current government, I don't think there's any chance that that's happening. And it's not directly related to the military issue, but I think one of the things that's so stunning to me is that, since at least, at the latest 2000, and when you're talking about August of 2001, we had already been suffering from a concerted terrorist war that Arafat launched in September of 2000. August, we had so many suicide bombings. Perhaps the largest and most notorious was the Sbarro pizzeria bombing in Jerusalem, where you had, I think, 15 or 16 people killed, and 8 of whom were children with their parents on the last week of summer vacation. And the Americans seem to be unaware of the implications for them or for Israel of what had been created by the Oslo process. And here we are all these years later, and so many Israelis have been killed, and yet the Israeli left and the security brass refuses to look at the reality in the face and recognize that this just is an unsustainable thing. So really the most irreversible aspect of Oslo was what it did to the Israeli left. And I find it just so disheartening that this is the case. I mean, we're faced with a situation where only one half of Israeli society is willing to base policies on reality, and they are only to a limited degree.
Of course, and therefore I'm getting anxiety whenever I'm listening to a new American president promising we are committed to the security of Israel. Actually, they are meaning security for Tel Aviv, security for those cities closing to Tel Aviv. I'm calling them Gush Dan ghetto. They are committing to the security of the Jewish ghetto along the sea. But if just security is the whole purpose, why not in California? But we are here not only in order to get secured life, much more than that. We need homeland, and the homeland is not Tel Aviv in itself. The Tel Aviv function is to be a gate to Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is not Rehavia in West Jerusalem, it is a Mount of Temples. This is a story. I remember I spoke with General Zini, 2001. And then he asked me, do you mean that the whole issue is a religious one? I told him, absolutely yes. And if not, there is not at all a problem. And if you are not understanding the Mount of Temple problem, so you can remove the Mount of Temple location from East Jerusalem to West Jerusalem. Why not to remove it already to California? But it is a location, specific location, and it is a religious conflict to begin with.
Gershon, I think what you're saying is so key, and I want to just thank you so much for your insight. As Barbara Liff, I think she's a former member of Peace Now, and she was brought on to be in charge of the Middle East in the State Department. She's coming here, or is it the National Security Council? I can't even remember anymore. But she is coming here now, and her plan is to escalate US and Israeli actions to resuscitate a policy that has caused only death and devastation and has endangered really Israel's very existence for the past 23 years. So I appreciate, or how many years? 1993 to 30 years. So I appreciate so much your time and really the detail that you've brought to the discussion and your security expertise in relating to it. I'm going to have you on this show much more often to talk about things. So thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you. We are all wishing to the best future for all the people in that land. Of course, for the Jewish people, but for all of them.
I couldn't agree more, and especially as we're coming up on Rosh Hashanah, and we really have to begin and end every conversation with greetings of Shana Tova and Happy New Year, and may the year coming upon us be a good year and a better year than the last one. And here I just wanted to share with you guys some closing thoughts after listening to General Gershon Hacohen and what he explained to us just now. What we're seeing more and more today is this loss of faith on the part of Westerners, and particularly Western elites, in their people, in their nations, in their understanding of why they're part of a collective, We see this very clearly in the United States, of course, where you have the elites in America are going after all of the national symbols and proclaiming them to be somehow systemically racist and evil. And so you have purgings of art museums. You have obviously the dictatorships of the woke academia that's blocking free access to ideas and discussion of ideas at America's top universities. And through all of this, the legitimization of anti-Semitism, hatred of Israel, and the transformation of the war against Israel to something that's only perhaps second to the war against America, and certainly more openly discussed in polite company. And in Israel, you have a similar distancing and even cutting off of our elite class from the nation of Israel, from the animating concepts of Judaism. Just last week, the education minister, Shasha Biton, announced that they were ending all study of Jewish history before the 19th century in Israeli schools, that children aren't going to learn about Judah Maccabee any longer in schools, or about the Bar Kokhba revolt, and that as far as the Ministry of Education under the woke left is concerned, Jewish history begins in the 19th century, from which you can understand nothing about what it means to be Jewish or what it means that Israel exists. They also cut off all trips to Auschwitz, to Poland, to visit the Holocaust sites, so that Holocaust education in Israel is being whittled down to nothingness as a result. So we're seeing this cultivation of ignorance of what it means to be a nation, in Israel's case, what it means to be a Jew, what it means to have a homeland in the land of Israel, by our elites. And at the same time, we're seeing strategic actions being taken by our nation's leadership, our woke national leadership, that make it increasingly difficult as a practical matter for Israel to defend itself in any meaningful way from the Palestinians. And as we see with the nuclear deal, which I discussed last week with Richard Goldberg, also from Iran and its nuclear threat to Israel, it's as if nothing matters anymore. If our nationhood doesn't matter, then similarly, we're not supposed to take seriously threats from our enemies, whether they're Palestinian or Iranians, calling for the annihilation of our country, because it's really all about us and our inherent evil and venality. And so this concept, this decolonization ideology, this anti-Western ideology, this anti-Semitic ideology, this anti-historical ideology, its goal is to essentially annihilate our nations. Whether we can understand it or not is really the question that defines our time. Whether we can defend ourselves against our own people, against our own elites, is really the question that's going to define our times. Gershon Hacohen, who we spoke with today, has really been a lone voice in the IDF for many, many years, trying to explain the importance not only of Jewish settlement in the land of Israel, along the lines that were really understood by Ben-Gurion and the Zionist socialists who formed the country, who established the country, who led the country until 1977, to military leadership, to a national security elite in Israel that simply doesn't want to hear anything, that sees only, not only do they only see the trees and not the forest, they oftentimes see only individual leaves of the trees. They don't even see the branches of the trees, because from every corner, the truth is shouting out to them that Israeli withdrawals from Judea and Samaria, like the ones from Gaza, have been devastating to Israel's national security. But they're so intent on fighting their political enemies on the right, and that includes and involves attacking Jewish history, attacking our national heritage, which is really the cradle of that heritage is Judea and Samaria and Jerusalem, that they don't want to hear anything. They don't want to look at anything. And the nightly raids in Jenin that are so limited, that are so, tiny in scope versus the expansion of the threat emanating from Jenin and northern Samaria, show just how impossible it is for our elites to take anything seriously. You saw that in the United States in the raid in Mar-a-Lago, which led directly to Biden's effective declaration of war against half of the United States population last Thursday. So I think you have to watch this space. You have to see what happens in Israel. You have to understand also the elections that are taking place, the fifth now in 3 years. as very much a definitive moment in Israeli history. After a year of this woke government, I think Israelis should already understand the stakes, and yet we see all of the time the media seeking to raise up everything to a shallow level so that we don't see the forest from the trees, so that we don't even see the trees themselves and what's at stake. This is happening in Israel. It's obviously happening in the United States. And we just have to wish and hope and work towards our people recognizing the stakes and acting to protect our national identity, our national sense of purpose, and our territory. So I thank you very much for watching. And next week, we're going to have another episode of this show where we'll talk about something else with somebody else. And I hope you stay tuned to this space, whether it's through the podcast or watching. Take care and have a great week.